So in this video, I'd like to discuss something called the Ileocecal Valve, so ICV for short, and that's how I shall call it from now on because it's far less of a mouthful and a lot easier to take on board. Now, the ileocecal valve, as far as I'm aware, is something that isn't considered within conventional medicine. And the thing is that when it's dysfunctional, it creates so many different symptoms that I am quite sure that if this area was addressed more regularly, that there are so many health conditions or chronic illnesses that would just naturally melt away or improve as a result. Now, with the ileocecal valve, I'll list all of the symptoms below this video because there are just so many of them, so I could be here for several minutes listing them off. But just to give you like a general guide, the types of symptoms that you get from the IC valve being dysfunctional would be just feeling tired all of the time, just never really quite feeling well and not being able to put your finger on it. It just creates loads of different joints, aches and pains. It can create bad breath, body odour, because we should be able to just sweat as much as we like and there should never be an offensive smell as a result. You can get a fluid retention, IBS, so it can be diarrhea, constipation, or it can be that what's called the swinging IBS when you move between the two, and I'll explain. That will become more relevant as to why that is in a minute when I go on to explain the IC valve. So like I say, I will list all of the symptoms below. So as far as the IC valve, where is it? So it's called the ileocecal valve because it's at the junction between your small and your large intestine. So it's the ileum and the cecum, and it's a valve that's sitting in between the two, essentially. And it's as far as where it is, so if you took a diagonal line from your belly button to the bone at the very front of your hip on your right hand side, kind of in the middle is around where your ileocecal valve is. It's also a point that's called McBurney's point, and it's an area that if it's very tender if you have appendicitis. But certainly some cases of a grumbling appendix or the appendix being inflamed could in fact be the ileocecal valve being tender. So again, that's where I think sometimes if somebody's had surgery, had their appendix removed, but they're still continuing to get the symptoms, then I would be suspecting the ICV, the ileocecal valve. So it's just, as I say, it's just on that right hand side. So particularly when it's dysfunctional, sometimes you can find that it becomes quite raised or hard in that area as well. So as far as what the IC valve is doing, so as I said, it's that junction between the small and the large intestine. And as you may remember, your small intestine is all about absorbing nutrients. It's where 90% of your absorption is happening. And the large intestine is all about that final stages of preparation as far as before you have a bowel movement. But it's where essentially your feces, your stool, is in that area. So there's lots of toxins that are there to be removed from your body. Now, the ileocecal valve, if it stays open for too long or inappropriately, what happens is you can get a backflow from your large intestines into your small intestine, which is exactly what you don't want, because what can then happen is those toxins get into the small intestine and then they're absorbed into your bloodstream, and that's why you get all that kind of fatigue and feeling achy, and those joints aches and pains. And the headaches as well, because essentially unfortunately you're creating toxins in your own body. Also, because the bacteria in your large intestine aren't meant to be in your small intestine. So there's a particular condition that's called SIBO, so small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Again, that can be because your ICV isn't functioning correctly and it's staying open longer than it should be. Then you can get the opposite, so you can get that the ICV stays closed when it shouldn't be. So with that, then you'll be more likely to be constipated. And a real giveaway clue with this is that you wake up in the morning and you feel really achy and groggy, and you find that as you move around, that achy, groggy feeling or tired feeling improves, and particularly you'll feel better after having a bowel movement as well. So that is a real, like I say, a real big clue that your ICV is potentially staying closed when it shouldn't be. And then what happens is, because the ICV is staying closed longer, then it's called the chyme that comes from your small intestine is actually putrefying, unfortunately, in that small intestine area, which again is creating toxins which then could be released into your bloodstream as well. So as you can see, that either your ICV is staying closed or open longer than it should be isn't an ideal situation at all, and you can see why it could lead to long-term or chronic health conditions if you're not even aware that this is something that's potentially a problem. So it's something that within systematic kinesiology that we treat, and it's really, really effective. And it might be that you're not able to go and seek professional advice, because again, like a herbalist or nutritionist can also help to treat this area. Just to name a few, it's not an exhaustive list, but it might be that you want to try and help yourself as far as helping things to stay in balance, and certainly long-term changes will be what would be needed anyway. So it would be all about making sure that you're following a really good healthy diet. So everything that we've discussed in the videos about your digestive system, and whether you were too high or too low stomach acid, then those forms of diet changes also will help your ICV. But there's also some particular things that show up in clinic as being usual culprits. And they are your caffeine and alcohol, so tea, coffee, alcohol. It's your high sugars, milk, wheat, salt, but meaning table salt. It's far better to change to something like a mineral salt. And also too much raw food. So we think of like a raw food diet as being a really, really healthy thing, but if your ICV is already dysfunctional, it's like an irritant for the valve. So make sure that you cook everything. So even your fruits. So be like cooking it down to a compote, just because that's a lot more easily digested for your body. And also things like nuts and seeds. So again, that's a food that you would think would be really healthy and good for you. But again, if things are dysfunctional, then it's another area that could be irritating the ICV as well. So those would be the main areas to focus in on as far as self-help that you can do. And I'm sure that will help to get things into balance. And you need to give your body time. So I would follow that advice definitely for a month. It can be 2 to 3, even 4 months, and it may even be that if things aren't really getting back into balance beyond that, that it is really the time to be seeking professional advice for more guidance and for more help for your system to help to really strengthen everything up so that IC valve is able to function at its best.